If you're a wealthy American, if you're Warren Buffett, you know, we have a very famous example, a video that's going viral on Twitter. 13-year-old girl says to Warren Buffett, "I'm really worried about the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency of the world. We're printing lots and lots of dollars, and if we're not the reserve currency, the value of the dollar is going to collapse. We're going to have hyperinflation. What should I do, Mr. Buffett?" You know, and I wouldn't normally criticize, you know, a respected, successful business person of his age. But he and Charlie Munger did choose to go up on stage and answer questions and give financial guidance and advice and investment advice, and they are looked up to. And so you watch Warren Buffett answer the question, and his answer is, well, yeah, I mean, I guess the Fed inflated the money, but they needed to. And, you know, it's really difficult, you know, and politicians have a difficult problem. And yeah, you're right, it is a problem. And Munger will say, you know, the dollar's going to zero. It's going to zero. They know it's a problem. And then he kind of meanders through it with an end advice, which is, well, you know, I don't know, but, you know, America's a great country. Don't bet against America. But the blood-curdling, terrifying, you know, depressing, you know, takeaway from the clip is the 13-year-old girl knows what the problem is. The country's full of people that can articulate the problem and write 1,000-page books on the problem. If you're rich in America, you don't have the answer because you're too comfortable.
Warren Buffett is the most successful investor of all time. In fact, if you had invested just $1,000 in Berkshire Hathaway when Warren Buffett took control of the company in 1964, your investment would now be worth over $22 million, a return on investment of 2,200,000%. Every year, Buffett, alongside his right-hand man, Charlie Munger, hosts a Berkshire Hathaway shareholder meeting in which they cover the company's performance and field any questions from investors. This year, a 13-year-old girl posed a question to Buffett and Munger about the United States' multi-trillion-dollar debt burden and the inevitable printing of money that the central bank will have to do to service this debt. She was scared of the inevitable inflation this will cause and the debasement of the US currency and what the solution will be. Warren and Charlie were actually stunned. They had no solution to the question and could only muster that they have trust in the United States and what a great country it was. In his most recent podcast, Michael Saylor, the founder of MicroStrategy and the man that spearheaded the institutional adoption of Bitcoin, responded to Buffett and Munger, destroying them because the answer is so clear. Before we see Saylor's response to Buffett and Munger...
Hi, my name is Daphne. I'm 13 years old, and this is my 6th annual Berkshire Hathway shareholders meeting. And I've had the privilege to ask you both questions in years past. My question for you today is the following. As you know, the U.S. national debt is currently at an estimated $31 trillion, making up about 125% of the U.S. GDP. In the meantime, over the past few years, the Federal Reserve has telegraphed that they intend to monetize the debt by printing trillions of dollars, even as they insist that they're fighting inflation. Already, other major economies in the world, such as China, Saudi Arabia, and Brazil, are moving away from the dollar in anticipation of this. My question is, are we likely to face a time in the future when the US dollar is no longer the global reserve currency? How is Berkshire prepared for this possibility? And what can we do as American citizens to attempt to shelter ourselves from what's beginning to look like the beginnings of de-dollarization?
Well, I should ask you to come up here and answer some questions. I mean, it's very interesting. I mean, we are the reserve currency, and I see no option for any other currency to be the reserve currency. And I think that nobody understands the situation better than Jay Powell. And but he's not in control of fiscal policy, and every now and then he drops a few hints. And there was no question that when the pandemic broke out, I mean, it was a semi-warlike situation, but nobody knows how far you can go with the paper currency before it gets out of control. And particularly if you're the world's reserve currency. Nobody knows the answer to that. And you don't want to try and pick out the point at where it does become a problem, because then it's all over. I think we should be very careful. I mean, we all learned Keynesianism, and we applied it in World War II to the advantage of the country, and we did everything we could to prevent inflation during the war. And then the war ended in August of 45, and I think in January 46, and I'm not giving you exact figures at all now, but in January 46, I think the rate of inflation was at something like 1% or thereabouts. And by the end of the year, I think it was at like 15%. And again, I'm doing this from long memories, but it's easy for America to do a lot. But if we do too much, it's very hard to see how you recover once you let the genie out of the bottle and people lose faith in the currency. And they behave in an entirely different manner than they do when they feel that if they put some money in the bank or have a pension plan or whatever it may be, that they're going to get out something with roughly equal purchasing power. And it just changes the economy, and all kinds of things can happen then. And I can't predict them, and nobody else can predict them, but I do know they aren't good. And we will see. And I do this as I voted for both parties, and it's not limited to politicians of either party or anything of the sort. People take positions. Some of them understand what they're doing. Some of them don't understand what they're doing. If they put me on some medical board, I don't understand what I'm doing. It's not that there's nothing wrong with the fact that you can't master everything. You can't all be Isaac Newton, but you can't go around pretending you do or making decisions on it. And we are not as well off in relation to curbing inflation expectations, which become self-fulfilling, and we are not as well off as we were earlier. And Berkshire is better prepared than most investments for that kind of a period. But I said this in the annual report, but we aren't perfectly prepared, because there's no way to perfectly prepare. You don't know what course of action will occur. And it's a very political decision now. It's a tribal decision to some degree. And you hope for leadership that actually will do something, recognizes the problem. And America's an incredible society, rich. We got everything going for us, but that doesn't mean we can just print money indefinitely as debt. And it'll be interesting to see how it turns out. Charlie?
Well, at some point, printing money to buy votes will be counterproductive.
Yep.
And we don't know exactly where that comes. And if something is going to be dangerous and unproductive, you ought to keep it a fair distance away. Now, if you have a culture that is exceptionally strong, like Japan, they have done some strange things there.
But they couldn't have been the reserve currency.
No, of course not. But Japan bought back most of the national debt and a lot of the common stocks, and debt. Just the Federal Reserve owns practically everything in Japan, and the country's working. It's had 30 years of economic stasis, but it's not going to hell. I really admire Japan, but I don't think we should try and imitate it. I don't think we're as good as Japan at taking.
They have a cohesive culture, and we don't, Charlie.
Yeah, that's exactly right. In Japan, everybody's supposed to suck it up and cope, and in America, we complain.
So I hope you come next year with a tougher question. And thank you. And I predict I would love to be being born again today in the United States. I mean, we can do a lot of dumb things and get away with it. We can't do an unlimited number. There are people who care about that, and you know, you have to be willing to be extraordinarily unpopular. I mean, Paul Volcker. There are other Federal Reserve chair people that would not have done what he did. It's just it's too uncomfortable. And there used to be a politician in Nebraska, and if you asked him some really tough question like, how do you stand on abortion, or he would look you right in the eye and he'd say, I'm all right on that one, and then he moved next. Well, that's what people have done, basically on inflation. And they one way or another, they say I'm all right on that, and then they don't really think about what the consequences of their actions could be, particularly. And it's so much fun if there's 435 of you, to just be one of 435 instead of being the person actually responsible. Anyway, I am still, next to the question of two superpowers, and when you get into really destroying a planet, destroying the reserve currency of the world when there's really no substitute, and forget about all the toys, I mean, it's a joke to think of any tokens or that sort of that's madness, but it's also madness to just keep printing money. Yeah, and we know how to do it, and we actually came from a money printing economy in World War II, which was required, and we suffered significant inflation. The price level, I mean, there are a million ways to judge it, but it's maybe 10 times what it was then, or something like that. Well, that's getting close to the edge of where you don't want to hold dollars anymore. You want to hold something else. You want to hold real estate. You want to hold an interest in a business. There's a lot of good. Your best defense is your own earning power. If you're the best doctor in town, if you're the best lawyer in town, if you're the best teacher in town, or even if you're the 10th best, you're going to make a good living. I mean, the economy is productive, and you will succeed with your talents, but you won't succeed by hoarding dollars. You'll just succeed by the fact that your value to the community, which is a rich community overall, is sustained. And so the best investment is always in yourself. That's the answer I would give you.
Well, we have a situation where we've learned to print money in gobs and let a big chunk of our young people go right into wealth management. This is
like we did.
Yeah, like we did. Yes, we've been bad examples. And I want to say that I didn't realize wealth management was going to get so big when I went into it. And I want to apologize for what's happened.
So there's Buffett and Munger struggling to answer the 13-year-old girl's question. Although they both have faith in the system that made them the most successful investors of all time, it's clear to others that we've reached a tipping point. Buffett and Munger have no solution to the inevitable debasement of the US dollar, and the hard truth is that every currency on a long enough timeline goes to zero. In his latest podcast, Michael Saylor responded to Buffett and Munger's comments. Here's what he had to say.
If you're a wealthy American, if you're Warren Buffett, we have a very famous example, a video that's going viral on Twitter. 13-year-old girl says to Warren Buffett, I'm really worried about the U.S. dollar is the reserve currency of the world. We're printing lots and lots of dollars, and if we're not the reserve currency, the value of the dollar is going to collapse. We're going to have hyperinflation. What should I do, Mr. Buffett? And I wouldn't normally criticize, a respected, successful business person of his age, but he and Charlie Munger did choose to go up on stage and answer questions and give financial guidance and advice and investment advice, and they are looked up to. And so you watch Warren Buffett answer the question, and his answer is Well, yeah, I mean, I guess the Fed inflated the money, but they needed to. And, it's really difficult, and politics have a difficult problem. And, yeah, you're right, it is a problem. And Munger will say, the dollar's going to zero. It's going to zero. They know it's a problem. And then he kind of meanders through it with an end advice, which is, well, I don't know, but, America's a great country. Don't bet against America. But the blood-curdling, terrifying, depressing, takeaway from the clip is the 13-year-old girl knows what the problem is. The country's full of people that can articulate the problem and write 1,000-page books on the problem. If you're rich in America, you don't have the answer because you're too comfortable. Right? And so what you've got is a bunch of mega billionaires that are very successful in America, but they don't have an answer or solution to the 13-year-old girl. The solution to the question was Bitcoin, right? And Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger can't allow themselves to understand that because they're so successful, they don't need to open their mind and embrace a new idea. If Warren Buffett woke up tomorrow and his bank seized all of his assets and they were devalued to zero, and he was a pauper, and his neighbor, the Uber driver, was walking around with $100,000 worth of Bitcoin on a hardware wallet, Warren would say, what is that again? Explain that to me.
Yeah.
What do you mean? My government, my bank can't steal all my money? That's a pretty good idea, right? And so I think that when you're a refugee from fleeing Iraq or you're crossing the border, and when you try to go through an airport and a hostile regime steals all your money and seizes all your gold, when you have to flee your 1,000-acre or 10,000-acre farm in Africa because a hostile regime decided it was illegal for people like you to own land, when that happens, you become a believer in a non-sovereign store of value crypto asset network, which is what Bitcoin is. The people that came to this country, the Huguenots, the settlers, the colonists, I think they understood it. I mean, they had all their property seized from them from wherever they came from. And their idea was, here's a place where I can own something and people might not steal it from me. As soon as they got here, people started trying to steal it from them again. Right? That's the human condition.
Just slower.
But that's why they kept going west. It's like, I got to go west where there's no politicians to steal it from me. Right? And that's a pretty powerful driver. So I think that the conclusion is people that are comfortable, they're fat, dumb, and happy in the United States are going to continue to reject new ideas like crypto assets like Bitcoin because they don't have to. If I don't have to embrace a new idea, when I get to a certain age, I won't. And that is as old as the Thomas Kuhn structure of scientific revolution. He said, paradigm shifts only get embraced in times of war or when the old guard dies. If you want to introduce a new idea, you need a war. Wars kind of work because if we're fighting a war and I introduce an airplane and I drop a nuclear bomb on your head, then you stop rejecting air power and you stop rejecting atomic weapons. You embrace the reality that, yeah, they do work and maybe you need to figure it out. Wars work, but absent a war, people just have to, they just have to pass.
There's Michael Saylor's response to Buffett and Munger. To him, the answer is clear. There's one pristine asset which is the hardest money on earth: Bitcoin. Bitcoin has a hard supply cap of 21 million that it's baked into its code. The government can't intervene with it or confiscate it. But what do you guys think? Do you agree with Buffett or Saylor? Let me know in the comments. Anyway guys, hope you all enjoyed today's video and that provided you with some value. I'll see you all in the next one, and as always, all the best.